Good morning, everyone. It's Tim here from Marketsharp, and thanks for joining us today for our special Qualified Remodeler Home Improvement webinar series event. We're pretty excited about today's topic. More about that in just a second. But when you think about it, you look at the topic and it says why brand building should be your number one marketing priority. Frankly, that's a little unusual. A lot of us haven't heard that over the past few years, so it's kind of unusual that we're talking about this thing called brand. So I'm excited about what we're presenting here today and what Rich has in store with us, because I think you're going to find it makes a whole lot of sense in today's marketplace. So keep in mind that you can call in if you need to. Most people just get the audio over the computer with your voice over IP. But if you need to, you can call in using this number and access code on your phone if the audio is not necessarily coming through well because of an internet connection. So keep that in mind. Now, you can communicate with us through the use of the communication palette. I'm pointing to one right now. You should have had one pop up that looks similar. And you can send questions our way during the webinar or comments, and we'll do our best to keep on top of that. Although we got a big crowd here today, sometimes it's tough to keep up. We'll do our best to keep up and maybe get you an answer back in the Q&A window, or might bring up your question on the call so the whole group can benefit. So if you don't mind, let's test that out. Why don't you put your name, your company name, and location in that area where it says enter question for staff in your communication palette, and then click send, and we'll just verify that indeed everything is working, and then we will get on with it. So again, click in there, put in your name, company name, and location, click send, and we will verify everything is working. All right. Excellent. Thanks for that. So today's webinar is hosted and sponsored by our friends at Qualified Remodeler. More about them in just a second. And our company, Marketsharp, that many of you are clients of ours, so we appreciate that. So hang around till the end. Going to give away a bunch of stuff. First off, we're going to give away a one-year subscription to Marketsharp CRM, and that's about a $1,380 value. So watch for that. And you got to be around at the webinar to be in the drawing, because we randomly pick people that are currently on the webinar when we do this. And also, we're going to give away 3 great books, and more about this book in a second. Talks about unlocking limited lead flow. And this is a book specific for our industry that Rich, our guest speaker, has written recently. And I know you guys will love that. So we're going to give a couple of those away. And by the way, let me go back to that, because I want to make a point about that. Down here, it says up to a $10 million value. Now, it's not that the book sells for $10 million, but there's certainly ideas in there that can take your company and get you up to that level of $10 million or more, if you wish, as you grow your business. So we're happy to have our friends again at Qualified Remodeler be a part of the webinar series. And Patrick O'Toole, I just got in touch with him. Unfortunately, he's on an airplane right now and couldn't join us. But he wanted me to say a couple words on behalf of Qualified Remodeler and let you know about a really special event that's coming up March 17th through the 19th, specifically in New Orleans, which is a fun place. Imagine being there on St. Patrick's Day, because that's when it is. So what's going on is this is Qualified Remodeler's Top 500 live event. And we've been at the past 2 of these in the past couple of years, and this is really a great event for our industry. So you really might want to make note of this date. Go to www.qrtop500live.com and learn more, and highly suggest you get there. Here's what I've learned about these events. I go to these events, and guess who I see there over and over and over again? I see the companies that are doing the absolute best in the country attend these kind of events. And who I don't see there are companies that are just kind of plodding along, maybe can't get over the hump of a volume barrier that they can't break through and so forth. And they're too busy working in their business to get to these events. Yet the ones that are most successful, they're there rubbing shoulders with all sorts of really successful companies, learning what's working, what's not, and growing their business. I know it's hard to get away to get to some of these events, but it really makes a difference in your business. So keep this in mind. You'll get more information from us on Marketsharp in the future about that. So www.qrtop500live. Now, when you guys registered, you were kind enough to send some questions our way. So I thought I'd share a couple of these with the group before Rich gets into the content. And I think he's probably going to answer these questions. I didn't run these by him yet, but I think he's going to answer these questions in his content. So here's one that came in. Isn't branding only effective for very large companies that have huge marketing budgets? Another question, how quickly can you expect to see results with a new branding strategy? And what are your thoughts regarding using Facebook ads? in our advertising? And what is the single most important thing that you got to have in place when it comes to brand building? And then finally, how can we efficiently and effectively build our brand while at the same time generating enough leads without breaking the bank? So great questions. I think those are some things that are on a lot of our minds when we think of this thing called branding. So again, the title, Why Brand Building Should Be Your Number One Marketing Priority. Now, if you don't mind, I want to send you a quick poll question and get your take on how you feel you're doing right now with your branding. So here comes a poll. As you can see on screen right now, that's what it's going to ask you. So how strong do you think your brand is right now? Ranging from very strong down to we really don't have a brand. So here you go. Go ahead and quickly click on screen right now. We'll monitor this and then we'll share the results of the group and we'll see where we're at in terms of what you guys think you're doing as it relates to branding. Okay, looks like about 70% of you submitted your responses thus far, so I'll wait just a couple more seconds. So quickly go ahead and click. Okay, last chance. I'm going to close the poll right about now. Awesome, thanks for that. So here's what we got. We got 3% of you said, we are awesome. Everybody knows who we are. 27% of you said most people in our market know us. And 44% of you said some people know us, could do better. 21% of you probably pretty weak here. 6% of you said we really don't have any brand. So great information for us to have and kind of use as we go through the webinar today. So thanks for that. So I want to introduce our speaker today. Rich has become a great friend over the years. I met Rich in, I believe, about 2005. And Rich is the founder and author of Level 10 Contractor, and he'll tell you more about that in a second. And he's worked with over 1,000 clients in our industry, conducted over 10,000 hours of training, and their company started offering full range marketing fulfillment services to our industry in 2012. So with that, Rich, I want to welcome you to the call. In a second here, I'm going to give you control and you can share your screen and give us some information about branding.
All right, thanks, Tim. Can you hear me okay?
I can.
All right, good. Thanks for having me on today. I am super stoked about today's topic. If you've been on my webinars before that I've done with Tim and Marketsharp, we talked a lot about a concept called identity. I will touch only briefly on that concept today, but we're going to talk about branding. Now, just a couple of things, Tim. First of all 5 of the questions that you put on the screen during the introduction are going to be covered in detail on the webinar today. So I can't remember exactly what they were, but as we're going through them, I was ticking them off going, yep, we're going to cover that, we're going to cover that, we're going to cover that. So we'll get to all of those things. Also, just sort of a housekeeping note in regards to the Top 500 Live event. I'll be speaking at that event, I think on the 19th of March. So you can go down there and maybe we can meet for all of you on the webinar today. Thanks for joining us today, but it would be nice to meet you in person too. So if you happen to have a chance to come say hello to me there, please do. I'd love to meet you. And let's jump into today's topic. Now, I'm looking at the poll. I was able to capture a quick screenshot of the poll so that I could reference it. And you know what? This is about exactly what I would have expected. 44%, so almost half, gave kind of the middle of the road answer. Okay, some people know us, but we could be doing better. Only 3% said that they have a strong brand. 27% think that you're doing pretty good, but you've got almost an equal amount that are weak or none. So I think we've got a lot of work to do here today. A lot of people, like Tim said, don't really think much about the branding. There's been so much emphasis on lead generation that the concept of branding has sort of been set aside and left for, quote unquote, like in your question, Tim, the bigger companies. So yeah, let's get into this and let's see what we can do about this. You know, this is really a question that people ask a lot. Who cares about brand building? Why should I do this? All of the same concerns that were in those early questions. And people have had this attitude about this kind of like, just get me more leads and get them for me as cheap as possible. And the reality is that everybody knows that a lead is not a lead, is not a lead, is not a lead. There's different hierarchies of lead. Let's talk about this for just a second. One of the things I hear from people a lot is, oh, the best leads are always what? I mean, what would you say the best leads are? Just kind of asking you rhetorically on this webinar. And here's what people always say. Repeat customers are the best leads. They're the easiest to close. They already have trust and confidence in us. Referrals are right up there. I remember meeting Dan Wald from Zen Windows like 15 years ago, and he said that 80% of his business came from referrals, and they were closing 80% of the leads. That's a pretty good business model right there. So repeat and referral, the reason that those are great leads, obviously, is because what? The word is trust. There's a trust factor there, right? Then we've got what I call home show branded. Now, I make this distinction branded because a branded home show lead is somebody that comes to the home show, and because of the branding that exists in the market already for your company, they come there specifically to find you and to see you and to talk to you. And you might think, well, that's kind of weird. Why wouldn't they just call us, whatever? Why would they wait for the home show? And the answer is, I'm not really sure. It's a phenomenon that exists, that people show up specifically to find you at the home show. Below that, we've got what I call media branded. This is radio, TV type leads, people that have seen you on radio and TV for a long time. They know who you are. They understand your company. They have a good feel for what you do, how you're different, how you're better. And they call you, and there's already at least a decent, if not a really high level of trust. And this is really what we're aiming for. These two right here, the branded home show, the branded media leads. This is kind of where I'm pushing you in today's webinar. Below that, we've got organic search. That's people that find you from Google or whatnot. Below that, home show unbranded. This is people that are at the home show and they're looking for somebody to sell them windows or siding or something like that. And they find you as one of the people that's there, and they sit down and they talk to you. Now, the reason this is a good lead still is because you have an ability, because of the personal interaction, to talk to them. So that's actually a really pretty good lead. You have an ability to generate some trust just based on the personal interaction that you have with them there. Below that, we've got advertising unbranded. Now, you might say to yourself, well, what do you mean unbranded advertising? Every ad that I ever ran had my brand in it, had my logo in it. Well, there's a difference between a branding effort like we're going to talk about today and just putting ads in things. So, for instance, if you're running ads in the Valpak or in RSVP or in the Home Mag, number one, I'm not telling you that's a thing that you shouldn't do. That's a thing that if it works for you and you're getting good results, a lot of my clients get really good results in those things, then that's good. But if you only run that ad in Valpak once every month, the people that are going there are not getting a high frequency. We'll talk about frequency later on in this webinar. So they're seeing you. It's almost if every time they see you, it's for the first time. That's not 100% true, because over the course of time, if you've been in there for years, they start to recognize you. So that might be a good thing. But think about this. What if you've got this massive campaign? It doesn't have to be massive, but for our words right now, let's use the word massive. You've got this massive campaign that's branding your company, and then they happen to also be looking through the Valpak, and they connect the brand that they see on this Valpak ad to this bigger brand that they've seen and heard and been familiar with in other areas. Boom. Now you've got an advantage over all of those other people in the Valpak. That's why some of my clients that I'm going to talk about and give us case studies in this presentation today do so well in these kinds of mailers. They're killing it in these mailers way more than their competitors, because they've got the power of this brand that's allowing these other things to work better. Okay, below that is pay-per-click. Well, the reason that pay-per-click is lower on this hierarchy, now let's be very clear. Did I just tell you that pay-per-click ads are not good? I did not say that. Here's what I said. They're lower on the hierarchy because these leads, I mean, think about it. Here's what those people are doing. They're going to Google and they're saying, hey, Google, I don't know who to call for my new roof. I don't know who to call for my siding. I don't know who to call for windows or sunrooms or decks or air conditioners. And so they're asking Google. And because they don't know, they're asking a third party to refer them to a website. And so you're dealing with people who aren't that familiar with you. The trust level is inherently lower, not because you're untrustworthy or not because it's not a a common thing that people are searching. It's because they just didn't know. So they have to go ask somebody. And then we've also got down in that area, aggregated leads. This would be your Home Advisor, Craft Jack, Modernize. And again, let me be very, very clear. I'm not saying that these are not good leads. I've got a client right now that buys 3,500 aggregated leads a month. 3,500 a month. They're very, very good at handling those leads. They're in the mid 20 to almost $30 million in sales, almost primarily off of shows and aggregated leads. So you definitely can do something with them. The problem, again, like pay-per-click, is the people that are going to the aggregators generally don't know who to call. So they're asking a third party, hey, Angie's List, who do you recommend? Which is a lot different than look at number 2 on this list, referrals, right? So there's a difference in the quality of leads and how easy the leads are to deal with and how much trust the person comes in the door with based on how the leads are generated. So what I'm going to try to help you do is not to get rid of your aggregated leads or your pay-per-click leads or your unbranded advertising leads or your home show leads or your organic search. I don't want you to get rid of those, but what I do want you to do is start building a brand so that everything you do works better, okay? And you see this on the screen. This is kind of our theme for the day. Selling to friends is easier and more profitable than selling to strangers. So here's a good question for you to think about right now. Are you spending most of your time selling to friends or selling to strangers? Friends being people that are familiar with your company, that have a positive association with your company of some sort, or are these people that are just never even heard of you, that the first time they ever heard of you literally was 11 seconds before they called you? Or in some cases, like with aggregated leads, they never even heard of you until you called them. So we want to start dealing more and more with friends. Not that we need to get rid of all the other lead sources, but we want to kind of push up the ladder here, okay? So we're going to get into that. Let me introduce who I am. My name is Rich Harshaw. Many of you have seen me around. I've been in this industry for a long time now, but it's a big industry, so a lot of you probably not as familiar. Started my company in 1994, November 9th. We're coming up on 25 years, Tim. Can you believe it? We've been specializing in remodeling since 2005, and that is actually thanks to Tim Mush, who introduced this webinar today. He called me and said, hey, would you like to do, in those days it was called a teleseminar, we now call it a webinar. And in April of 2005, I did a teleseminar/webinar for Tim, and the rest is history. I've become very, very involved. I love this industry. I have a passion for this industry. I love the people in this industry, and really just trying to help make a difference for people. Because here's what I know. I mean, it's a different kind of an industry than some other ones I've been involved with. And a lot of the people in this industry come from a background of either having been in sales, home improvement sales, or having been in production. So what I find is, and you know, this is kind of the problem in the industry, but it's also the opportunity in this industry. The problem is there's a lot of people that own companies that don't have a background in running companies. They have background in production and they have background in sales. In fact, Tim, I'm going to just guess, I haven't really done a poll on this. I'm going to guess that fully 2/3, if not higher, of all owners of home improvement companies come from a sales or a production background. So what happens is you get a lot of people that are good, honest, they're good at what they do, but they just don't know how to push that business over to the next level. And my passion is working with those people that are really good, honest, earnest people and say, look, from a marketing standpoint, because that's my thing, here's how we can get you there, okay? Now, the company used to be known as Monopolize Your Marketplace. That might be something that you're familiar with. We've rebranded our company. So we have the same people. We have the same things in our company. We do the same kinds of services, but we've rebranded, and the new company is called Level 10 Contractors, you're aware. And I'm going to tell you why. And I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but it's relevant and it's very germane to today's topic of branding. Here's what happened. In 2011, I got a call from a company called Horizon Service. It's an air conditioning company that services the Philadelphia area. At the time, they were doing $44 million in sales. I started working with this company over the next 6 years, from 2011 to 2017. The company grew from $44 million to $150 million, and they sold out to private equity. There's a lot of things that have to go right for a company to grow from 44 to $150 million. One of the things that went right, among many things that went right, was the marketing. And I was integral in that process, because what I was able to do is take this company from being primarily a direct mail oriented and newspaper oriented company to being primarily a television and radio dominated advertising and marketing company. Now, if you look at their budget when they're doing well, let's start at $44 million. If you look at their radio and TV budget, they were doing a 10% of sales was their budget. So they were doing about $4.4 million in marketing. That first year in 2011, their advertising budget had $57,000 of radio and no TV, because they didn't think it worked. They didn't know how to make it work. You say, well, how did they get to $44 million? And the answer is, in the air conditioning industry, direct mail has been very, very useful and productive, because there's a certain type of mailer that industry uses that generates tune-ups, which then turn into new systems and repairs and all that kind of stuff. But they had shied away from what we're talking about today. And the problem is, when all of your money is tied up in direct mail, they were doing about $2.5 million out of $4.4 million in direct mail, which still leaves a couple million for other things. They were in the newspaper, so that was good. Back then, there was still a little bit of yellow pages. There was some online digital stuff, pay-per-click, things like that. But they weren't very well branded into the marketplace. In other words, when you're sending a mailer to something like 600,000 homes, and any individual home is getting that mailer every 6 to 10 weeks, you're not really becoming very well known in the marketplace. So I said, hey, we need to get you on TV. We need to get you on radio. There was a lot of mental hurdles to get over in terms of tracking and the ability to make sure that it was actually working. But we ended up getting that budget. The first year, $1 million in radio. The second year, 2013, was $2 million in TV and $1 million still in radio. And then the budget continued to grow all the way through 2017 to about $5.5 or $6 million on radio and TV. And the company just blew up. And you say, well, that's a cute story, but what does that have to do with me? Well, I also started working with some other companies at the time. In 2015, I started working with a company called Jericho. I still work with this company today. Very interesting company. I'm going to profile them at the end of this webinar as a case study. The short version is home improvement, kitchen and bath remodeling company doing about $10 million in 2015, and they were doing $1 million of TV and radio. And I looked at this company and I found out that the way that they were doing things was very, very different than the way most home improvement companies that are smaller do it. Also started working with a company in 2015 called Service Champions, another one called You Build It, which is a national franchise, another one around that same time called 1-800-Hansons. And here's the interesting thing that I discovered working with these companies. These were all larger companies that were run by people that knew how to run businesses, and they did everything right. Now, not literally everything, but close enough to everything that I learned quite a bit, that I took and I put all of the things that I learned from these companies into this book that came out at the beginning of this year, January 2019, called Unlocking Unlimited Lead Flow. And you might look at this book and you might think, oh, well, this is about how do I generate leads? And it is. That's obviously a major topic. But the real thing that this book is about, and the whole first part of the book, isn't about here's a tactical way to generate more leads. The whole first part of the book is here's how you need to think as a business owner if you want to be the kind of company that can grow to $10 million, to $40 million, to 50, 80, $100 million. You have to think the right way. You have to conduct your business a certain way, and then you have the ability to unlock unlimited lead flow. It's not about tactics and techniques. It's about a mindset that allows you to grow and allows you to have the money that is necessary to grow, to spend on marketing and other things in your business. That's what this book is about. And of course, the whole last probably 60% of the book is about here's things you do to actually generate leads, but not without the first 40% about here's the mindset that you need. So we're going to give some of these books away at the end of the webinar, so stick around. I'd love to draw your name and send you a copy. So here's what we rebranded into: Level 10 Contractor, with a mission to help remodeling and home services companies make the jump to $10 million by generating unlimited lead flow. But again, predicated on the right kind of mindset. So that's kind of who we are. Let me tell you what we're going to talk about today: why brand is important, why most remodelers don't engage in brand building, how and why brand building works, and then a tactical plan for actually doing it, what to expect, how long it takes. See, Tim, this was one of the questions. Oh, hey, how long is it going to take? I'm going to tell you. And then examples of companies who have done this. So let's start with Coke and Pepsi. There was a test done, or some kind of an experiment that was done. It's actually done in Germany a few years ago. And here's what they did. They took people and they gave them blind tests of colas. And they said, here, I want you to taste these 4 colas. They didn't tell them what they were. They told them that the 4 colas were going to be Coke, Pepsi, and then a local generic brand. And then what they said was a new test brand. And they wanted people to test these and see what they thought and give their reaction and give their feedback. And some really interesting information came out of this. Now, here's what they did during this test. They hooked these people up to some kind of equipment. I don't know if it's MRI or EKG. I'm not sure what the details of that were, but it was the kind that can detect what your brain signals are and your brain waves are, and it can map things in your brain. And interesting thing. So first of all, they played a little trick on the people. They gave them, I said this actually wrong, a little bit wrong a second ago. It wasn't a blind test. They told them what the 4 colas were, but here was the trick. It was actually all the same cola. So there wasn't actually 4 different colas. There was actually only one. And they told them, this one's Coke, this one's Pepsi, this one's a generic, and this one's a new brand that we're testing. And they wanted them to rate it and compare it and give their opinions on it. Interesting thing happened. When they tasted Coke and Pepsi, which obviously are very strong brands, then the reward center in their brain was activated. Think about that for a minute. The reward center in their brain was activated. But when they drank what they thought was the generic brand or the new brand that was being tested, the value judgments part of their brain was activated. I want you to think about that for just a second. The exact same cola, 4 times in a row, literally no difference in the taste, but the part of the brain that activated differed depending on what they thought they were drinking. If they thought it was a brand that they were familiar with, it was a reward. It was good. If they thought it was something that they were unfamiliar with, the value judgment part of the brain activated, and they started going into this rationalization and this judgment situation where they were trying to figure out, do I like it or do I not like it? Now, go back earlier to what we were talking about when I showed you the hierarchy of different kinds of leads, and lay over and map the first story about colas to the second story, or the first thing we talked about, which was the hierarchy of leads. If you've got a referral, they're coming to you with the reward center in their brain activated. If you're a pay-per-click lead, the pay-per-click lead is coming to you with the value judgments part of their brain activated, and they're trying to decide, who do I want to use? This is why I talk constantly, and I think it's so important for you to be on this webinar and to explore this topic of selling to friends versus selling to strangers. Now, here's why most contractors don't brand. And you see on the screen, I've got a picture of the generic cola. And I put that on there because you, if you're not a branded company, are like the generic cola. The first reason is it's a fragmented industry. There's just a ton of small companies. They're small. Everyone's addicted to fast, cheap leads. Just give me leads. I talk to contractors every day of the week, probably Sunday excluded. And I've been doing this for years. And the number one thing, it's like I said at the beginning of this webinar, everybody wants to know is, can you give me more leads? I need more leads. I need more leads. And that's understandable, but there's a concept that I'm going to get into a little bit later called hunting versus farming. And what we see is that people are addicted to hunting. They take their little bow and arrow, their little, fishing pole, depending on how you want to use the analogy, or their, little 22 rifle, and they're out there trying to hunt for food. And if they get food for the day, they eat. If they don't get food for the day, they starve. And what I'm talking about today is growing crops so that you have more of an agricultural type mindset, so that when it comes time to eat, not only do you have enough to feed your family, but you have enough to feed the village, and you have enough to store to make it through the winter. That's what brand building is about, okay? It's a sales-driven industry. I remember when I got into this industry in 2005, I asked Tim a very specific question. Here's what it was. Hey, Tim, who are the marketing gurus in the home improvement industry? Because I've been around a lot of different industries, and each industry seems to have a couple of marketing gurus. And he said, well, there really isn't any. That's why I called you. But we do have a bunch of sales guru. And he started listing off all the different guys that were involved in sales training. It goes all the way back to the Tin Man days and the door knocking days and the telemarketing days. It's always been a very sales driven industry. What I'm trying to do is help companies that are ready to make the jump to become a bigger, more substantial company to understand how do we get not away from sales, because sales is always going to be an important part of this industry, right? But how do we become a marketing driven industry, or at least your company become a marketing driven company? Again, why? So that we're selling to friends instead of selling to strangers. I mean, think about it this way. If you're a window company and you went to sell to your mother or your brother, would you have to go through a company warm up and go through all of the information about all the stuff? No, you just go in there and you say, look, this is the one you need. And then people buy it because they trust you. It's a trust game. People think that branding is too expensive. I'm going to tell you right now, that is not a true statement. That is a false statement. I'm going to show you how to afford it later on in this webinar. They think that branding means colors and the look. And they say, well, what do you mean? We are branded. Look at our trucks. They look great. Okay, that's a good start. And they say, well, look at our ads. They all look uniform and the same color, and we've invested in graphic design, and my guy shows up on the door with the company polo shirt on. Okay, those are all great steps, but that's not the extent of what I'm talking about here. That is what I would call the branding starter kit. Okay, you need to do those things. If you have a giant brand and you don't have company polo shirts that all look the same color, and you don't have nice looking graphic design and logoed trucks, well, that doesn't make any sense. But that is the starter kit for branding. That's the starting point. That is not the ending point. And we'll get to the ending point as we go through this. The result, no brand. You're like the cola that the brain says value judgment, right? So let me tell you a story about this. This represents, it's not the actual photo, but this represents going back to 2010. I was on spring break with my family, and I've got 6 kids. And in 2010, my kids ranged from, about 6 years old to like 16 or something like that at that time. I have one son in particular. He's my 4th kid, my 3rd son. And he's just got a very curious mind. We're on the beach. This was over in California, Oceanside. We were walking on the beach, and we saw this sign, looked a lot like this one. It said, no alcohol, no glass on the beach. And he looked at me, and he's 10 years old at the time and very inquisitive. He said, well, why is there no alcohol out on the beach? And I said, well, look, it says no glass. A lot of alcohol comes in glass containers, and if it breaks and it gets in the sand, people can't see it. They step on it. That's a problem. And he kind of went, oh, okay, that makes sense. And I said, well, the other reason is that, if people get drunk on the beach, then they start acting rowdy and they start causing problems, and it's just not a good scene. So, they just don't allow any alcohol on the beach. And he thought about that for a second, and he asked me a question that might seem a little bit weird to you, but it didn't seem weird to me. The question was, again, this is a very inquisitive child. He said, well, Dad, have you ever drank alcohol? And again, the reason that question was not weird was because the church that we go to, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, it has a prohibition on alcohol. It's against our religion. We don't drink alcohol. So he wanted to know, we always talk about don't drink alcohol. So he asked me, have you ever drank alcohol? And I answered him truthfully. And I said, well, actually, I have drank alcohol exactly one time in my life. Well, now he wanted to know all about this, kind of a scandal going on in the family. And I said, here's what it was. I was about your age. I was probably 9, 10, 11, somewhere in that range. And I went over to my friend's house, Tommy Lott, who lived next door. Our driveways were on the same side of the house that faced each other. And we hung out a lot. And we went into his garage, and we opened his dad's beer fridge, which was in the garage. And we took a can of beer out. And we didn't take it out to drink it. We took it out on the driveway. We shook it up for about 30 seconds, and then we chunked it up in the air. And when it came down, we'd done this before. It would explode, and it was kind of fun, and it looked cool, and we could probably get away with 1 or 2 at a time, and Dad wouldn't notice. Well, on this particular day, we chucked it up in the air. When it came down, it landed a little closer to me than I had expected, and it exploded, and I was trying to turn away, and in the process of trying to get out of the way, my mouth opened, and literally one single drop of beer went into my mouth. And I told my son, yeah, that's it. I've drank beer, 1 drop in my entire life. And then his question, hilarious. He says, well, what kind of beer was it? I just kind of chuckled, and I said, well, I actually remember it was Michelob. And I could see from the look on his face, he didn't really know that brand Michelob. And so he asked me the next question. He said, well, did they have Bud Light back then? And you just got to know this kid to understand this line of questioning. And I thought about it for a second. I said, well, I'm not really sure exactly when Bud Light came around. This would have been the early 80s when I drank my one drop of beer. I said, it was probably around. I think they probably had Bud Light. And then the kicker, here's the question, and this is going to tie into our webinar today. He said, well, back then, did Bud Light have drinkability? And I just started laughing my head off. And I thought, think about this for a second. You've got a 10-year-old kid who lives in a house where they don't have any beer in the fridge. They don't have any beer anywhere around. They never have. He's not familiar with beer on any macro level. Yet he not only understands that there is a brand of beer called Bud Light, but he also understands that the defining trait, at least as portrayed by the advertising at that particular time, was that there was a characteristic of Bud Light that was called drinkability, and he wanted to know if it had it. How does that happen that a 10-year-old kid is that familiar with that product? And the answer, of course, is it's advertising, right? It's branding. And this is where we're going today, is we're going to talk about branding. And this story scares people away because I think what happens is people look at the concept of branding and they think that, well, yeah, Bud Light and Nike and Lucky Charms and General Motors and all these huge multinational companies and Apple and Facebook, they all have this giant brand. And, you know, this kid had been exposed probably at football games and baseball games and watching sports on TV, had seen this brand called Bud Light and the commercials for drinkability, and they were kind of funny. And you kind of get discouraged and you think, well, I can't do that. You think I can't do that. Well, here's what you need to know about this. You don't have to dominate the entire world like Bud Light so that a 10-year-old random kid knows not only your brand, but its attributes. You only have to dominate your local geography. Now, if you're in 13 geographies, that's a little bit daunting, but that also means that you're a big enough company to be in 13 geographies. The majority of you are in one geography. Jericho, one of my clients, they're in Kansas City. That's it. Horizon, they were in Wilmington, Delaware, and Philadelphia, which was right next door. Then they got into Baltimore. That's it. My client out in California is in Orange County. They're not even Los Angeles. They're just in Orange County. That's it. You only have to dominate your local geography. And here's the cool thing. It's not that hard to do. It takes two major things, and that's what we're going to talk about. The first one is a great identity, and the second one is reaching a ton of people at a reasonable cost. Okay, this is it. Make a note, take a screenshot, memorize it. You've got to have a great identity, and you've got to reach a ton of people at a reasonable cost. Now, we are not going to spend time today talking about a great identity. I've gone over that in other webinars. I've put a definition on the screen right here. Definition of identity: words, phrases, and images articulated with power, precision, and passion that instantly, definitively communicate who you are, how you're different and better, and what customers can expect when doing business with you. That's what identity is. And I talk about this. If you're not familiar, we have a daily podcast over here at Level 10 Contractor. It's called the Level 10 Contractor Daily Podcast. You can look it up on Apple Podcast. If you've got an iPhone, it's already built into your phone. Just go to the purple icon that looks like the one on your screen, and then search Level 10 Contractor. It'll pop up. If you don't have an iPhone, you can go on an Android. You can download Spotify. There's also other platforms where you can get this. But if you go to episode 11, which was on September 19th, or episode 24, which was on October 2nd, one of those is a keynote that I gave on the topic of identity. The other one is actually a webinar that I did with Marketsharp a few months ago. I think it was in June, on the topic of identity. So I highly encourage you. This is central to everything brand building. The problem with this concept is I don't really have time in the confines of this small time frame on this webinar to talk in detail about identity. So I'm going to push you over there. Go to the podcast, download those. You can listen to it while you're driving, you're exercising, whatever you're doing, making dinner, who cares? And, also just listen to this daily podcast. It literally is 7 days a week. We've been doing it for a couple months now. We have a great listenership, and it's also sponsored by Marketsharp. So another good reason to support that. So listen to that and understand identity. Again, I'm going to go back one slide. Identity: words, phrases, images articulated with power, precision, passion, instantly, definitively communicate. Here's the part that I want you to look at, that communicate who you are, how you're different and better, what customers can expect when doing business with you. This is so critical that we're not just out there in the marketplace putting a color or a logo or a company name out there in the marketplace, but we're putting a message out there that allows people to know who you are, how you're different, why you're better, and what they can expect when they do business with you. So go download this podcast if you haven't already. If you're not familiar with this podcast, by all means, get familiar with it. It's going to be a tremendous value for you every single day. Okay? Now, as we push forward in this webinar, let's talk about the difference between being professional and branding. You know, like I said a minute ago, this is a step one to look the game. Vehicle wraps, uniforms, consistency in your colors and in your advertising, high quality graphics. It's the first step. You know, I was talking to a company, this was just last month, actually early in October. And here's what the guy told me. They were in two different markets. One was in Indianapolis. The other one was a small town called Marion that was outside of Indianapolis. It wasn't a suburb. It was its own market. I think it was something like 75 miles northeast, I think, of Indianapolis. If I'm wrong on that direction, forgive me. And here's what the guy told me. He says, we're doing really well in Marion. We dominate this town, and we do it on almost no advertising. And I said, well, what do you attribute that to? And he says, we have 5 trucks that are driving around all the time. He says, but we're in Indianapolis, we're not doing as well. We have the same 5 trucks, but we don't have any traction, and we're actually losing money in that office. They had 2 offices, one in Marion, one in Indianapolis. And I said, well, let's talk about this for a minute. I said, so you've got 5 trucks. Are they branded in different colors, whatever? And he said, yeah. And I did a quick look, and I found that in Marion, there were about 30,000 people, and it had an area of about 15 square miles. So think about this for a minute. If you've got 5 trucks driving around constantly in an area that's 15 square miles, and there's only 30,000 people, how many people are going to see those trucks over the course of a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years? And the answer is they're going to become well known. But now you take those exact same 5 trucks, you stick them in Indianapolis, which has 2 million people, and it has 372 square miles. You see the problem? So if you want to be in a really small town, you may not have to do the things that we're going to talk about. You can just go to level 1 here, which is, first step, get your trucks looking the same, looking a nice color, and get your guys wearing polo shirts and stuff like that. But if you're in any kind of market that's any kind of size at all, those things are not going to get the trick done, okay? You're going to need to do more. And we're going to talk about what that more is right now. And here's what it is. The key to branding is consistency and frequency. Write this down. Make a note. This is the key to branding and growing your company and getting everything you want out of your company. It's consistency and frequency of a message through advertising in the marketplace. Consistency and frequency. Now, remember a minute ago, I said that there was 2 major steps. One was having, what was the first step? Man, I forgot what the first step was. I think it was just having the right look. The second step, though, was getting out there. Oh, it was having an identity. The second step, sorry, I forgot my steps. The second step was reaching people on a consistent basis frequently, and then there was a key part of that I don't want you to forget, at a reasonable cost. So what we want to do is talk about how do we get in front of a lot of people on a consistent basis as frequently as possible for as little money as possible. And I'm going to tell you, I've been doing this for a long time, and I'm going to tell you what the answer is right now. It's 3 things. Number 1, television. Number 2, radio. Number 3, Facebook. Now, you might say, well, what about this, or this other thing? And the answer is, yeah, those things might be worth talking about. But let me tell you how you're going to do it if you want to really play with the big boys. The answer is TV, radio, and Facebook. So that's what we're going to talk about. I'm going to tell you another story. This one is about Wall Drug. And this is to kind of drive home the point. And I want you to understand how and why this consistency and frequency works. So I told you about spring break. That was 2010. Earlier than that, 2005, I went on a cross-country trip with all these kids. And if you've ever heard me talk about the showerhead story, you'll hear that in the identity webinar. That was on this same trip. On this same trip, we were driving across, it was like no man's land out there in, Wyoming, Montana, and then into South Dakota. And I started seeing these signs along the barren wasteland. And you can see, this is literally a photograph. I didn't take this, but this is what it looks like. You got these big fields of nothing. And then I started seeing these billboards, coffee, wall drug, 5 cents. And I thought, what is that? And then we got into, what do you call that? Mount Rushmore. It's in Rapid City, South Dakota. We went there, we took the kids, they looked at it, they cried because they were tired and hungry, but they looked at it. And then the next day we drove from the west side of South Dakota, which is Rapid City, to the east side of the state, which is, I think it's Sioux Falls, South Dakota. It's about a 5-hour drive on Interstate 90. And that was our plan for that particular day. And I started seeing more and more of these signs. And here's what they look like. I'll just give you an idea from this slideshow. So take a look. Here's a sign that says Badland Maps, wall drug. I actually took these photos myself. 6-foot rabbit, wall drug. Kids board, wall drug. Wall drug is told by the Denver Post. Here's one that says wall drug was seen on country music television. Wood carvings, wall drug. Silver dollar display, wall drug. Wall drug, exit 110. Kodak film, wall drug. Free refreshing ice water. It's cool, wall drug. Skinny saloon, wall drug backyard. Real Americana, wall drug. Wall drug mining experience. Mining company, mining, panning, digging. 5-cent hot coffee. Traveler's Chapel, new T-Rex, as seen in the Wall Street Journal, free donuts and coffee for honeymooners, new dinosaur, shooting gallery, new backyard, Black Hills Gold, experience wall drug. We've got British Petroleum, wall drug, Western bronze displays, free coffee and donut for veterans. And I guess if you're a honeymooning veteran, you get 2. I don't know. Wall drug just ahead, homemade lunch specials, Western stuff, and these signs went on and on. It was incredible, the quantity of signs for this place called Wall Drug. Well, funny thing happened. Wall Drug is actually only 50 miles east of Rapid City, which means that in that 50-mile drive, my 2 youngest kids fell asleep there. At the time, they're only 6 months and 2 years old. And I begged my wife, we got to stop at this wall drug. I got to see this. You know, from a marketing perspective, I was just blown away. I had to check this out. And she said, no. We are not waking these kids up when we've got a 5-hour drive and we've got 4.5 hours left and they just fell asleep for a 2-hour nap. Not happening. So we didn't get to actually stop. But later that night, this is again 2005. So you got to remember, you know, we didn't have iPhones and we didn't have mobile internet and all that kind of stuff. So we got to the hotel. I got my laptop out and I started checking Wall Drug. And I actually ended up calling the guy, a guy named Ted Husted that owns Wall Drug. And I asked him, you know, tell me about this place. And I did some research. And here's what I found out. So first of all, I asked Ted, how many billboards do you have? And he said he didn't know. He only knew how much they cost. I estimate that in the 50-mile stretch between Rapid City, South Dakota and Wall, South Dakota, which is where Wall Drug is found, I estimate that there were between 80 and 100 billboards. So do the math on that. At 90 miles an hour, that's 2 per mile. That's one about every, I don't know, what is it, like 11 seconds or 25 seconds or something? I mean, it was constant, just boom, 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 boom. And I found out that 70% of the cars that pass Wall Drug stop. 70%. So to use marketing terminology, their conversion ratio was 70%. And in the summer, which is their peak season, that was as many as 20,000 visitors a day, which was almost as much as Mount Rushmore, believe it or not. Now, here's what I want you to think about. Did the number of billboards have anything to do with the 70% conversion rate? Or asked differently, if they were to lower the number of billboards, let's say it was 100. I don't know for a fact that it was 100, but it was close. If it was 100 billboards, which is 1 every 2 miles, 2 every 1 mile, if they were to lower the number of billboards to 50, do you think it would affect their conversion ratio? And the answer is, well, I don't know. 50 is still a lot. That's 1 every mile. And it's only 50 miles. So they would probably still have a high percentage of people stop. Well, what if they were to lower the number of billboards to just 10 instead of 100? Would that affect their conversion ratio from 70% to some number that is lower? And the answer almost certainly is, yeah, it would go down. What if there were only 5 billboards, 1 every 10 miles? What if there were only 2 billboards? What if there was only 1 billboard at the exit? Now, here's what I'm hoping you're drawing, connecting some dots. If there's only 1 billboard at the exit, you know what that's equivalent to? That's the equivalent of a pay-per-click lead, right? One billboard at the exit. I'm ready to find a roofer. Hey, Google, who do I use? And, oh, here's a company called XYZ Roofing. Okay, what do I know about them? Nothing. How much do I trust them? None. Is that wrong? Is that bad? Does that mean that you shouldn't get that lead? No, of course not. But here's what that means. Why not put up 100 billboards so that by the time they get to the exit, which is represented in this analogy of when they're ready to buy, they already know exactly who you are, how you're different, what you do, what they can expect when they do business with you. You've already sort of loosened the ground. That's what we want to accomplish. Now, on this next slide, this is a little bit heady stuff, but bear with me. This is very, very much worth it. This is something called accelerated discontentment. This is a concept I came up with about 10 or 15 years ago that explains how the frequency and consistency of a message causes people to take action sooner and more readily in your direction. So if you look on the left-hand side, you see this chart says discontentment. This shows how discontent somebody is with their situation, which kind of seems like a little bit of a weird way to say it, but stick with me. It'll make sense. You'll see at the top, it says, I've had it. This is where people are so uncomfortable and unhappy with their situation that they take action and they do something. At the bottom, you see it says bliss. I mean, they're super, super happy. They would never imagine changing their situation. And then the middle line, it's a little bit below middle, but you see the line that goes horizontal, says fine. Okay, that means that they're okay with their situation. They haven't been frustrated enough to change it, but they're also not super, super, super happy. So here's what we see, just in any kind of a scenario. This black line represents people's contentment with something over time. Let's say, for example, that this is your contentment, or excuse me, a homeowner's contentment with their kitchen. Okay, so here's what you see on the left-hand side. Each of these tick marks on the horizontal line represents a period of time. It might be a week, it might be a month. Let's say for our purposes, it's a month. So here's what you see. They're doing fine, everything's great, and then you see here at about month 1, 2, 3, about month 4, they go up to about a level 3 discontentment. Well, why? Well, here's why. Here's what we find, that people will have some sort of an incident that happens in their life. Now, here's what you need to understand about these incidences. They're personal to each person. They have nothing to do with you as a company that sells something. Something happens in their life that makes them feel discontent. It could be a dinner party that they had at their house, and they felt like, man, the kitchen just isn't big enough, or maybe it's not nice enough, or doesn't have enough countertop space, or anything, right? And then here's what happens. You see that after that incident, it starts to trend back down towards fine. Well, why would it get better over time? And the answer is because this is human nature. You don't stay discontent and upset just like you don't stay super happy and excited for very long. You kind of tend back down towards just sort of a neutral, everything is okay kind of a scenario. And then we have this second incident that's about 6 or 7 months in. Now, what is that second one? First of all, notice this. It's not as big of a discontentment. But then here's what we see. We see something happens that makes it go down to happy, and it stays there for a while. Now, what happens is a lot of times when people are feeling discontent, and they feel discontent for a second or third or fourth time, they'll take some action that isn't going to completely solve their problem, but it'll make them feel a little bit better. So maybe this would have something, maybe they painted their cabinets or something like that. Or maybe they went and bought, a new refrigerator because that was part of the problem with their kitchen. Or maybe they bought some new dishes because that would make their kitchen at least look nicer. And that scratches the itch for a while, but look what happens when it gets down there in the happy area. It starts trending back after a while towards just doing fine. And then sure enough, what happens? Another incident occurs. And this might be, you're having a wedding and people are coming into town, and now you're really feeling self-conscious because your kitchen is old, it's outdated, and man, crap, if we just had the better kitchen, then we'd be better. And then over here on the right-hand side, you see this incident that finally pushes them over the edge to where they say, I've had it, I can't stand it, I've got to do something. And this might be, in our analogy or example right now, this might be the mother-in-law coming over and saying, oh, well, how could we possibly have Thanksgiving at your house with that tiny ugly, outdated kitchen you have, or something very condescending like that. And finally, the lady says, that's it, I've got to fix this kitchen, right? This is called accelerated discontentment. Here's what I want you to understand about this. You have no control over when these incidences occur. So here's what happens normally. You go out there with an advertising message, and it's represented on this screen by these pink triangles at the bottom. And what happens is your advertising message goes out there, and what you're doing is you're hoping to get lucky and have your advertising message hit them right when they're having an incident, so that they'll want to, take action and actually call you. But here's what you got to realize. Number one, if the incident wasn't bad enough to cause them to take action, it doesn't matter if they see your advertisement, they're not going to take action. And number two, you have to time it just exactly right. See, sometimes I think almost arrogantly, we think that our advertising is going to push people to do something. But what we really have to understand is that we have to wait for people to have an incident in their life, and a repeated incident that causes them to get enough frustration to want to do something. Okay? Maybe one of those incidents is a positive thing where they get a big bonus or some money and they can finally take action. Who knows? Now, here's what happens when you advertise consistently. Notice what happens to this pink line. It starts to push it up a little bit over time. And the further we get to the right, the further we get down the timeline, the farther apart the pink line gets from the black line, representing the idea that because they've seen you consistently over time, that you've started to have some sort of impact on their thinking. Now, all of this supposes that you have a message that has identity, that you have a website that encompasses that identity, that helps people to understand who you are, how you're different, why you're better, and what they can expect when they do business with you. And if so, over time, they consistently see your message, and they're going to say to themselves when they have an incident, man, maybe their incident is actually going to feel worse than it otherwise would because you're in their face enough. But here's where we're trying to go with this branding thing. Watch this when I put these green triangles. Now, notice the number of triangles. This represents high frequency. So the consistency is still there, but the frequency now is really, really high. And here's what happens. Look at the green line on this chart. What originally felt like a level 3 discontentment event, that's what that first exclamation point on the left is. It felt like a 3. Now, because they've seen our ads so many times, it feels like a level 5 or 6. Now, the second event, which felt like only a 1 or a 2, feels like a 7 or an 8. And now the third incident that used to feel like a 5, it pushes them over the edge. And the reason is because we've been in their face so many times with such a great message, telling them that there's a better way to handle their roof, their windows, their kitchen, their air conditioner, whatever it is. The trust has been built, and they start to accelerate their discontentment. And look what happens. They actually take action much sooner. And who are they more likely to call? The answer is the company that has been consistent. Now, if you are not that company, okay, and you do not have this frequency and this consistency, I want you to understand who you're competing against. You're competing against the company in green. And you wonder why you stay small, and you wonder why it's so hard, and you wonder why you can't break through, and you wonder why when you buy the aggregated leads, you can't contact them and get them to do business with you. It's because, guess what? Your larger competitors that have invested time, effort, and money into the marketplace over the last 3, 5, 10, 18, 25 years are sucking up all the business because they've created all of the trust in the marketplace. And when you're small and trying to do this, it's very, very difficult. So you've got to start. I just want you to understand what the landscape is. You don't have to like what you're seeing on your screen right now. You just have to believe that it's true, because it's true, okay? So this brings us to this concept of hunting versus farming. The companies that are going to dominate are the ones that are investing in farming. The ones that are not are the ones that are perpetually hunting over and over. And look at the illustration on your screen. It shows a guy who's planting coins in the soil, and he's growing dollars as crops. This is what we're trying to do. Planting coins and harvesting dollars. If you're perpetually involved in hunting, now what would hunting be in terms of lead generation? This would be showing up at a home show and hoping people walk by your booth, but with no other points of contact with your company prior to just showing up and seeing your booth there. This would be a pay-per-click lead in absence of any other kind of advertising and marketing. Again, did I say pay-per-click leads are bad? No. But guess what? You're going to do better with them if you've got the branding to back it up. Now, I'm actually going to tell you a story that's going to contradict that a little bit, but it will make sense here in just a minute. It's going to blow your brains. It's an amazing story. We'll get to it in just a second. But think about the aggregated leads. Here's what I want you to really consider. All of my clients that are huge clients that are multi 10, 50, $100 million clients, guess what? They all buy aggregated leads, every single one of them. But guess what? They're way, way more effective at converting them, because when the person finds out, oh, it's Horizon Services, oh, it's Jericho, oh, it's Service Champions, oh, it's Hanson's, they say to themselves, oh, I know that company. Remember the COLAs. Remember Value Judgment versus Reward Center. And they go, oh, yeah, that sounds like a company I want to do business with. Meanwhile, you paid the same amount of money for that same lead and you can't convert it, and you get pissed and you wonder why. You know, it's interesting. I had a little talk with Tim before this call about aggregated leads and Home Advisor, and he said, I don't know if you're, really a big fan of aggregated leads, Rich. And I said, no, you misunderstand. I love aggregated leads, but I talk to probably 80% of the companies in the industry hate them. And the reason they hate them is because they can't convert them. But the reason they can't convert them is twofold. Number one, it's because they're not set up to quickly deal with those. Speed to lead is really, really critical on aggregated leads and on pay-per-click leads. But here's the other part that's huge. It's foundational. It's fundamental, is when you're a company that nobody's ever heard of and you're calling the guy, you've got no trust built. You're starting literally from zero. And that's way harder than your competitors that are huge, that have the brand, that are also buying those leads that you're competing against. You say, well, then, what you're saying, Rich, is that it's just stacked against me. There's no way I can win. Well, that's dumb. Don't think like that, because all of those big companies, guess what they used to be? Guess what Jericho used to be? They started in 2008 with $0 in sales. They never existed. Nobody in the Kansas City market had ever heard the word Jericho Home Improvements before 2008. They didn't exist. And they went to dominate that market in 5 years. How? I'm going to show you how. How can you afford it? First thing, raise your prices. If you are out there competing on price, you are going to be screwed, period. You're not going to survive a long time. You say, well, what about, what is it? Window World. Okay, great. Go be Window World. Meanwhile, everybody else, not a good strategy. Not a good strategy. All of the companies that I dealt with, the ones that I showed you earlier on the slide, Jericho, Horizon, Service Champions, You Build It, these are all premium priced companies. Why? Because you've just got to have the margins to be able to afford to do things right in your company, including spending it on marketing. Now, raising your prices is going to be a lot easier to do if you have a strong identity. So make sure that you get your identity down. Make sure your website is strong and solid in terms of not just looking good, but identity. And you've got to get good enough at hunting that you can put some capital aside. So when you start, you're always going to start with hunting, because that's where you're at when you got no money and you're just starting. Maybe that's you now. That's fine. Again, I'm not telling you not to do this. Here's what I'm telling you. You got to get good enough at hunting that you can put some aside so that you can plant it in the ground and invest so that you can grow some crops, farming, right? And then immediately start spending, and this is my very specific tactical advice for you. Start spending right this minute today, 5 to 20% of your marketing budget on farming right now. Well, how do I do that? I'm going to tell you about that. I mean, we're getting there. Give me a second. Okay, we've just got a few more minutes and we're going to wrap it up, and I'm going to tell you how to do this. Start right now, 5 to 20% of your marketing budget on farming, and then increase it over time to 50 to 70% of your total budget. Yeah, 50 to 70%. Do you know what percent of Jericho's budget is farming? It's 85%, 90%, 95%. I don't know. It's high. Here's how you do it. Reach people where their attention is and where it's efficient. This is going to be TV, radio, and Facebook. The messaging must be on point. I'm talking about identity. The buys have to be effective, efficient, and effective. I'm going to tell you something right now that is very hard medicine for you to hear. I don't care how big your company is. I don't care how good you are at negotiating. If you are not fluent, think about foreign language fluency. There's a foreign language called media buying. If you are not 100% fluent, you are not getting the best deals. You are being hammered by the radio and TV sales reps. Your buy is under leverage. Trust me when I tell you this. The radio stations and TV stations make money because they have to deal with two different kinds of people. They have to deal with you, local business owner, who they get the biggest, best margins from. And then they have to deal with guys like me who work with an agency who come in and beat the crap out of them on prices, beat the crap out of them on the CPMs, and generate really great buys. But they're okay with selling to me because they know the volume is high, but they also know that they're going to make it up on you when they sell you a crap buy. And you're going to spend literally, I am not exaggerating. You think, oh, this is just a guy on a webinar talking. No, trust me, it's true. Hear me now, believe me later. You will spend 30 to 3,000% more on your media buy because you don't know how to do it. This is critical. This is a big reason why people are not effective on radio and TV. Your website has to support the message. If you've got a great advertising campaign and then people go to a crap website and you say, well, my website looks beautiful. I'm not talking about the way it looks. I'm talking about identity, the way it looks, the power, precision, passion, communicating who you are, how you're different, how you're better, okay? Like we talked about earlier. You have to be also ready to handle the volume, okay? Here's what to expect on TV and radio. Remember, it's farming. I have seen so many times when people come to me and say TV didn't work, radio didn't work, Facebook didn't work. It's because you're using a farming media as a hunting ground. Now, you can generate some leads. Like there's a guy out there named Ron Sherman who does TV leads, and he'll put you on like the 12 noon news, and he'll do 3 commercials during the news, and it'll say, hey, we got a sale today. We've only got, this sale's only good for the first 10 people that call. And then he'll come back on the second commercial and say, oh, we've already had 5 people call. Oh, wait, we just got a lead in from Jane from Roseville. Only 4 left. Hurry, call. Then he'll come back at the end. We've only got 1 call. Call right now. And he's using television as a technique for hunting. And, it works to a certain extent, but guess how many people I've talked to that said, yeah, I used to do that and it quit working because it's not sustainable. Remember, it's farming. A lot of people who see your ad are not even prospects right now. The majority of people who are prospects are not ready to buy right now. That means that you should be thinking mostly in terms of future buyers, not immediate sales. When I say future buyers, think right now it's 2019. You start planting seed in 2020. It starts to deliver leads in the end of 2020, 2021, 2022. It's ongoing. If you start now, you will start to grow crops next year and the year after and the year after. If you don't start now, you'll never grow crops. You'll stay where you're at, okay? Here's the good news. You can reach people for way cheaper than other media. Direct mail, for example, $300 CPM. That's cost per 1,000 people reached. $300. That's at 30 cents per mailer. TV, radio CPM can be about $3 to $10. Facebook CPM is going to be somewhere in the $8 to $15 range. It's going to be a little bit higher, but guess what? It's going to be a lot more narrowly focused and targeted, so it's worth it. But think about this for a minute. $3 to $10 CPMs. That means that we can reach people over and over with consistency and frequency. A quick word on Facebook. The advantages of Facebook are tremendous. It's laser focused, both geographically. We can just go into one little zip code and we can start there. If your budget is small, we can also focus on women who are above $100,000 household earnings, who are homeowners, who are between the age of 45 and 65, who like the Bee Gees or whatever you want to do. It's very, very laser focused. We can start with small budgets, so that's good. You don't have to start with $1 million. This is one of the questions that came up earlier when Tim was going through some questions. I can't do this. It's too expensive. Well, guess what? We can start with Facebook. We can start with Facebook. The CPMs are low on, like I said, $8 to about $15 cost per 1,000. We can do something called custom audiences. I won't go into that in detail right now, but it just is another layer of of laser targeting that's tremendous, that's very unique to Facebook. Inexpensive to switch up your ads frequently. I mean, think about TV. It's hard to cut ads. Facebook is easy to switch ads up. There's no long-term commitment. You can start and stop anytime you want. And, my advice to you is to treat Facebook like farming, not hunting. This is the giant mistake that everybody makes. They go into TV, radio, and Facebook saying, okay, I want it to perform like Home Advisor. I want to give Facebook money and I want them to give me leads for a price of $40 to $100. It's not going to happen probably. It's going to take some time. Plus, here's the other thing, especially on TV and radio, a tremendous amount of the volume of TV and radio leads that you're going to get are not going to come from people calling you saying, I saw you on TV. They're going to go to your website. This is why your website is so, I cannot emphasize how important it is that your website has identity. I'm actually going to offer you at the end of this webinar here in just a couple minutes for us to do a website audit for you so we can audit the identity, what we call the conversion ability of your website. Stick around for a minute. We're going to do a poll and you can request that, because if your website isn't properly equipped to convert these leads, in other words, if the messaging is on point and on target and it's consistent and it's frequent, like I've been talking about, and your brand starts to build, and then they go to your website and it just looks nice, but it doesn't have the right messaging, you're going to lose prospects. You can't afford that, okay? This is an old well. My granddad had one on his farm in Kansas when I was a kid. We used to love this thing. And here's how it works. And I want you to just take this as an analogy kind of as we wrap up the webinar here today. Here's what happens if you've ever pumped one of these old wells. You get on that big handle and you start pumping it. And man, it's hard, especially when you're a little kid at your granddad's farm, and you pump it and nothing comes out and nothing comes out and it's hard. You put all your weight on it and your brother comes and pushes on it and it's hard. And you push on it and you push on it and it's hard and nothing comes out and nothing comes out. And then you work that thing and you start to sweat and it's hard. And if you do it for enough time, it seemed like about 3 hours. It was probably more like 30 seconds. But what happens is water starts to flow. And as soon as that water starts to flow, that handle becomes really easy to pump. You can do it with one hand without putting a lot of weight on it. And that water just keeps flowing and it keeps flowing. And that pump just keeps pumping and that water keeps coming and it flows. And advertising and building your brand is kind of like that. You're going to have to commit to it. The first step, like I said, is to look the part, to get your trucks to look the part and all that kind of stuff. But then we got to get this message out there. We've got to get it on Facebook. We got to get it on TV. We got to get it on radio. And here's what will happen. It'll be hard. We'll pump for a while and we won't seem like anything's happened. But if you just stick with it, it's going to start to flow. Here's how I know this. All of the companies that I deal with that are large companies do exactly what I'm talking about. And the companies that don't, that are smaller, that I also talk to all the time, that can't figure it out, they're not doing this. It's that simple, people. This is not rocket science. You either do this and engage in it, or you don't do this and don't engage in this. You don't have to start huge. You can start small. The consistency and frequency is the key. And then on top of that, that's overlaid on this concept of identity and making sure that your messaging is on point. Here's the results. People will call you even when your ads aren't running. I know, novel concept. The reward center in their brain will be activated. The competition shrinks to just a few key players that you're actually really competing against. The organic search rankings will go up. Why? Because people will see your name on the internet. They'll search and they'll find you, and the reward center will activate. Closing ratios are going to go up. It's easier to close friends than it is strangers. Sales and profits go up. Your company, this is an interesting one. If you've got a brand, you now have a sellable company. This is a conversation that I'm having more and more recently. I've had so many of my clients that have sold out to private equity for anywhere from $60 to $150 million, and it's only the companies that have the brands. And you say, well, that sounds like pie in the sky. I don't think I could get there. You can get there if you've got a brand. It's now worth something and it's sellable. Quick case study, Jericho. They started in 2008. I want you to think about this for a minute. 30% of revenues on advertising during their first 3 years. 30% of revenues. They got their TV and radio budget up to $1 million in the first 3 years, but then their budget stayed there at $1 million for the next 8 years because they already had bought pretty much everything they needed to buy in terms of media. They hired us in 2015 to do a couple things: fine tune and manage the media buy, and integrate the identity like I've been talking to you about into their messaging. Okay, here's what happened. We were able to negotiate the media buys about 30% better than their previous agency. Their previous agency was one of the biggest ones in Kansas City, very well known, very well respected. But here's what happens when you deal with a big agency. They usually hand it over to some junior level accountant that doesn't know jack about negotiating, and they just go buy crap that's available. That's not what we do. We come in there and we beat the living daylights out of these reps in a nice professional way, and we get better deals. We analyzed the lead patterns and shifted the advertising days and the media mix. So we shifted when their ads were running and where they were running, wrote ads that emphasized identity points, hired a new, more professional videographer so that the commercials on TV actually look better. And here's what happened. Lead flow has remained flat. And you say, well, what kind of stupid success story is that, Rich? And the answer is, yeah, we don't generate more leads because we're generating, guess what? Higher quality leads. Closing ratios have stayed consistent. The revenue per lead is up almost 2x. Home show leads have increased in quality and in quantity. Search leads are up. Sales and profits are up significantly. But the most significant thing I want you to look at on this list on your screen, revenue per lead is almost up 2x. They are selling to friends now instead of strangers, okay? And this is what John Bartram, the owner, says. We used to know how to spend money on advertising. What we didn't know how to do is communicate unique advantages with power, precision, and passion. Our revenue per lead is almost doubled. People call us now, they already know that they want to use Jericho. When people call us now, they already know they want to use Jericho. Unbelievable. This stuff just works, okay? This is not voodoo. It's not magic. It's not rocket science. It's principles, and it works. Now, if you want to see some radio and TV samples, go to my website, level10contractor.com. At the top, you'll see something that says services. And when you click on services, you'll see something that says radio and TV. And then if you scroll down that page, you can listen to some of these ads. I want you to hear how the identity works in these radio and TV ads. You can see there's a few different clients that are profiled there. So please do that, okay? Next, does brand matter? Go back to the beginning of this webinar. Look at the Coca-Cola, Pepsi. Remember that the reward center versus the value judgment center of the brain, okay? This is what we're trying to accomplish. We're trying to become the Coca-Cola and Pepsi. You don't have to take over the world. You just have to take over your local geography. That's all, okay? That's what we're trying to accomplish. Now, here's what I want to do. I want to offer you a website audit or a media audit. You can contact me, or in just a second, we will put a poll on the screen where you can request. Well, let me tell you what the website audit is. We will look at your website, and we're going to look at two different things. One thing is conversion ability. How well does your website contain identity and have the ability to convert people that come to your website into leads? Also, we're going to audit the findability, which is really an audit of your SEO and how easy can people find you on the internet. So that's something that we'd be willing to do for you. All you got to do is click on the poll or contact me at the information there. Also willing to do a brand and media audit. If you're already spending money on radio and TV or Facebook, we will take a look at what you're doing and we will give you an opinion on how efficient it is and if the buy is good or not. If it's good, awesome. If it's not good, you may want to change that over and do something a little bit different. Okay, so Tim, are you there?
I am, Rich. Let's go ahead and send them a poll. I'm kind of curious about something, so bear with me and let's get a poll sent your way. And while this poll is up, I want to make a couple observations of what I took away from the webinar. So let's get that poll up there and let Rich know whether you're interested in any of the things that he offered you here today. So here we go. Okay, I got that poll launched. So if you're interested in either the website audit or the brand and media audit, let Rich know, and they'll reach out to you and get you the information you need. But a couple of things you said, and this is something that's really dawned on me recently. And like you, Rich, I've been at this a while, and I've kind of watched companies grow and some not, and so forth. And what I've seen over the years, I've seen so many companies get themselves to $2, $3, $4 million in revenue, and they just stay there. They just stay there. It is so normal that that's what goes on. It's unbelievable. And what I've thought about recently When I look at the companies that are not just staying there, they're the ones that do grow to 10 million, 15, 20, 40, 60, 70 million. What what amazed me when I really thought about it is I found out these are the companies that are selling the highest quantity of stuff in a given market. Almost in every case, they have the highest prices in the market. And I scratch my head and go, wow, that's weird. You would think the companies that are really selling the cheapest stuff at the lowest price would sell the most stuff. And that's not the case. The companies that can grow beyond that plateau area are the ones that charge enough for their products that they have money to work with to do the things Rich talked about. Because I think some of you probably
Well,
listened to this stuff today and said, this all sounds good, but I don't know if I got the money to do this. And you may be right at your current pricing. So one thing Rich did mention in one slide is analyze your pricing and get it right. And if you do that, you're going to have this money to do the things that Rich mentioned. That's going to make all your marketing work so much better. I just think that's a critical thing to think about when you're really thinking
well,
about
and Tim,
business branding
just look
stuff.
at that on a local level. I mean, look at it at your grocery store. You're going to pay more money for brand name everything. Coca-Cola and Pepsi cost double what generic brand cola costs. And people buy it at a rate of like, what, 80% of the market or something, those two brands combined? Price is not the deal. It's the brand.
Absolutely. So listen, last chance you want to submit your response here, and Rich and his gang will reach out to you and get you the information you need to get your audits done. I'm going to close the poll right about now. So thanks for that. Looks like a fair amount of you are interested in getting some analysis on their business. So I just want to make one more appeal to what Rich has, and he just briefly mentioned it, but I want to say on his behalf, this podcast he's got going on is just awesome. I mean, this is new content daily. And what's cool is you don't have to listen to it live. You can do it anytime you want when you have some free time. So there is a wealth of information on building your business here, and it's just free. I don't know why anyone wouldn't want to do this. So go to www.level10contractor.com/podcast, or as Rich mentioned, you can just go and use your mobile phone to the Apple Store or get Spotify and Android and just search for Level 10
Tim,
Contractor.
just to be super clear. Yeah, just to be super clear, a couple
Yes.
things on the podcast. Number one, people have asked me, why do you do a daily podcast? That seems like it's overkill. Why daily? And the answer is simple, because I want you to be able to find content you like. If you listen to a given podcast on a given day, and it's not really something that's super interesting, just skip it. Come back tomorrow. See if you like that better. Go back and look in the archives and see what is there that you're interested in that specifically talks to things that you're interested in. So that's number one. Number two is to find it. Tim is let's just say of a different generation, and the mobile phone is not necessarily his best friend. For those of you that understand how your mobile phone works, just all you got to do is if you've got an iPhone, go to the podcast app that's built into the phone. You don't have to download it. It comes with the phone with the iOS. And it's the purple one that you showed earlier. Just open that up and then search for Level 10 Contractor Daily Podcast. If you're on a Android device, download the Spotify app, which you probably already have if you're on an Android device. And same thing, just search Level 10 Contractor Daily Podcast, and boom, it'll be right there. Subscribe to it. It'll be there every day for you. It's that easy. It's really that easy. So that's it. Thanks, Tim. I appreciate you giving me a chance to present today. Talk about branding. As you can tell, I'm very passionate about this topic.
All right, sounds good. So hang on, we're going to give a couple things away in just a couple seconds here. Before we do, just a quick shout out to what we do here at Marketsharp. We can help you accomplish a lot of the things mentioned here today with Marketsharp CRM. It's really a solution that helps in the admin, marketing, sales, and production part of your business. In other words, everything. And it's kind of like the glue that holds your whole business together and makes it organized and systemized. It's industry specific. It's built from the ground up to work the way your business does. Helps you do all the right things consistently. That's really the magic about it. We call it a business in a box because it has about 340 built-in success elements ready to use. And what I love about what we're doing here at Marketsharp is what you're seeing on screen right now. We think your data is really the core of your business, and that's really true. And what we've done is we've spent a lot of energy hooking up with a lot of the success resources that many of you are using already. Many of you use like Leap as a estimator program, or Constant Contact, or Apex Chat, or you got finance companies and things such as that. And Marketsharp integrates with all this stuff, distributes it out. It's kind of like a data distributor to all these cool success tools. So if you haven't checked out Marketsharp, certainly let us know. We'll be glad to reach out to you and get you some information and give you like a 45-minute demo and tell you everything that Marketsharp does. So go ahead and quickly click on screen here. Many of you probably already use Marketsharp. That's awesome. We appreciate that. So click on screen here. Let us know if you're interested. And then in the next slide, we're going to give a couple things away and get you off to your business. So last chance, you want to go ahead and submit your information here. Going to close the poll right about now. Oh my gosh, more than half of you already use Marketsharp. That is awesome. We appreciate that. All right, let's announce some winners here. First off, we got a winner of the 1-year Marketsharp subscription. That's a $1,380 value. And that's going to be Jake Snyder from Century Spouting. So Jake, we'll reach out to you and get you everything you need to get started with Marketsharp. We're excited to work with you on that. Then we got 3 of Rich's books, Unlocking Limited Lead Flow. And the first one is going to be Montana Gray Boys, I think out in the New Jersey way. So we'll get in touch with you, Montana, get that shipped to you. Also, John from Homecraft. And John, I believe, is in Delaware. I would have pronounced your last name, John, but it's way too tough for me. So, and then we got John Campbell. I can pronounce that last name. John is also going to receive a book, John from Quality Advantage. So thanks to everybody for joining us. Watch your email. We'll be sending you a link to a recording, along with maybe a link to get access to Rich's podcast and book and stuff like that. So we appreciate you spending time with us here today. Hopefully some of the information that was presented on branding your business and how you can take it to the next level will be useful for you as you enter into 2020. So thanks so much. We will look forward to talking to you again very soon. Bye now.